All right. Before you get to the Parsha, which is on 523, turn to the table of contents. The table of contents is about 10 pages in. And it says contents at the top, and then it has a list of the Parshiot. So turn to the table of contents. Everybody find that? Yeah, it's the very beginning of the Bible. You didn't get a book? Douglas, could you pass a book over to Adele and to Suzanne? Thank you. All right, yeah, is there any more books? Of course there's more books. We have no more books? What happened to more books? Share with a Jew who looks nice. Pick a nice warm Jew and sit next to them. All right, here we go. Now, the book of Exodus. Remember that it was the rabbis who divided the books of the Bible into weekly Torah portions based on ancient traditions. The book of Exodus is divided beautifully. It's divided in a perfect symmetry. So take a look with me, right? You have 4 Torah portions which tell the story of our enslavement and liberation from Egypt. Shmot, Va'era, Bo, Bishalach. In the portion of Shmot, we are introduced to the new king who enslaves the Israelites. We are introduced to Moses. Moses goes to Pharaoh and says, "Let my people go." In the middle 2 Parshiot, Va'era and Bo, are the 10 plagues. And in Bishalach, we leave Egypt and we cross the Red Sea. 4 Torah portions tell the story of our enslavement and liberation. So far, so good? Thank you. Ami, you're a mensch. Thanks. 2 Torah portions, Yitro and Mishpatim, take place at Mount Sinai. If you think of Mount Sinai as a kind of fulcrum, right? 2 Torah portions, we arrive at Mount Sinai, God comes down the mountain, gives us first the 10 commandments, and then a whole bunch more commandments. A whole bunch more commandments about how to live a life as a holy people. Okay? And then 4 Torah portions tell the story of the construction of the Mishkan. Mishkan means dwelling place. It's often translated as tabernacle, which is a terrible word. It sounds like a skin disease. It's something, How do you feel? I got terrible tabernacles. Mishkan is a better word. It means dwelling place, from the word shachen, which means to live someplace, to dwell someplace. The idea that you can build a structure, a physical and social structure in which God enters the world. So this has to be done properly because God is infinite, and to enter the world of finitude has to be done properly. So the 2 Torah portions, Truma and Tissa, are entirely instructions. God giving Moshe instructions, how I want this thing built, who is going to operate it, what they have to wear, all the physical objects that accompany this Mishkan. And it's all God's commandments to Moses to be conveyed to the people. And then the last 2 Torah portions, Vayakel and Pekudei, are almost exactly the same words as Truma and Titzaveh. Except here we're told, and Moses did it exactly as God told him to do it. Piece by piece, element by element, apparatus by apparatus, Moses executes the instructions and builds the Mishkan, creates the garments of the priests, and prepares this Mishkan for the operation. And then at the very end of the Parsha, at the very end of the book, at the end of Pekudei, God's presence comes and lives in it. It works. He switches it on and it works. So you have a perfect symmetry. 4 Torah portions tell the story of the enslavement and the liberation from Egypt. 2 Torah portions tell the story of the revelation, God's appearance at Mount Sinai, and the rules of holy living. 4 Torah portions tell you that you can create a place for God to live in the world. It's a perfect symmetry. 4, 2, 4, 10 Torah portions. 10 is a number of symmetry. 10 is a number of completion. 10 is a number of balance. 4, 2, 4. It's perfect. Except for one thing. There's an 11th Parsha. Damn! 11? What kind of number is 11? You can't even, with your fingers, you can do 10. What do? You need a toe? 11? There's an 11th Parsha? 4:2:4. It was perfect. It was perfect, right? You throw in an 11th portion. What's the 11th portion? It's the one we're reading today, Ki Tissa. What's the middle? What's Ki Tissa? Ki Tissa comes right in the middle between Truma Tetzaveh, when God gives the instructions for how I want this thing built, and Vayakhel Pekude, that Moses actually built it. It's stuck, jammed right in there. And it's the thing that doesn't belong. It's the thing that doesn't belong. This is the other voice. So you have one voice in the book of Exodus, which is the general voice of the editor of Exodus, who says the story of our liberation and our elevation from a people of slaves to God's holy people is a perfect creation story. The story of creation of Genesis takes place in 10 statements. 10 times God says, let there be. There's 10 commandments. There's 10 parts of the story of the creation of a holy people. And then comes this other voice and says, it's never that easy. It's never that clean. It's never that simple. Josh, you good?
Yeah, I'm just going to find a seat.
Oh, okay, we got seats. Come on in, come on. We got chairs, we got seats. It's a helpy shul that has more butts than seats. Come in, come in. Come on. So it's the Ki Tissa comes and says, wait a minute. This is the 11th Parsha, the one that doesn't belong. And this is the Parsha about transgression. It says that it's never so simple. The world is just not built that simply. And you have to understand, you have to account for transgression. You have to account for the rebelliousness of the human spirit. You have to account for the deepest, darkest elements of the human being. So let's go to Ki Tissa, which is on 523. And it starts out simple. When you take a census, everybody gets enrolled. You're going to count up all the people, and you're going to make all the rest of the things, and then it's going really well, right? And then look at page 527. I have singled out Bezalel, son of Uri, son of Hur, the tribe of Judah, and I've endowed him with divine spirit. He's the craftsman who's going to build the Mishkan. That's great. Wonderful. Turn a page. Right? Right? Keep my Shabbos. I want you to make the Mishkan, but I want you to make Shabbat. That's on 528. So when the rabbis came to the notion of Sabbath, over and over again the Torah says you're not to work on Sabbath, but the Torah doesn't tell you the definition of work. Work could be a lot of different things. So here the rabbis of the Talmud take the juxtaposition of the creation of the Mishkan with this commandment on page 528, verse 12, to make a Sabbath. They take that juxtaposition and they say all of the work done on the Mishkan is the work you're not allowed to do Shabbos. And that's where they get the definition of work. And it finishes. Look at page 529. There's a coda. There's a finishing. When God finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, he gave Moses the 2 tablets of the pact, stone tablets inscribed with the finger of God. You all saw the movie. Remember that fiery tornado writing this thing, right? Now, everything's great. Moses comes down, builds the Mishkan, God inhabits it, and we all live happily ever after, right? Not so fast. Not so fast. Here comes the story of transgression. And by the way, just as an aside, we talked about this once before. When you take family pictures on a vacation, and you come home from the vacation, and you print out the pictures, right? And you put them in the album. You take out the ones where the kids were cross-eyed or sticking their tongues out or the sun was in the camera lens. You take out the ones where, the pictures just didn't come out. The picture made me look fat, that sort of, you take, and you put in the family album all of the sweet, kind, happy, perfect family pictures, right? And if I were writing the Torah, that's how I would have written the Torah. I would have made the Jewish people look great. The people who wrote the Torah, though, had a different idea. They're going to stick in stuff which you and I would not put in our family album. right? You know, you visit my family's perfect. I don't know how many of you know been to my family. You know, my family, my children are perfect. My wife is perfect. When my kids sit at a Shabbos table, everyone a coat and tie. I mean, it's a machaya. You know, we eat with a knife and a fork. You know, that's the picture. You know, it's like perfect. You know, it's Ozzie and Harriet. Remember Ozzie and Harriet? Leave it to Beaver. When I was a kid, some of you don't know what the hell I'm talking about because you're under the age of 60, but leave it to be. I wanted my family to be leave it to Beaver, you know? I wanted to sit quietly at the table. No, the Jewish people not like that. We include a different kind of voice in the Torah. Here it goes. Ready? Buckle your seatbelt. This is tough stuff to read. When the people saw that Moses was so long in coming down from the mountain, how long was he on the mountain? 40 days, right. It's a long time. So the patience of the Jewish people is 39 days. 39 days they get really impatient, right? The people gathered against Aaron. That's a strange language. The Hebrew is al Aharon. Over against. Like they ganged up on him is sort of what it means, right? And they said to him, make us a god who will go before us. For that man Moses who brought us out of the land of Egypt, we don't know what happened to him. What happened? He's the one who's been leading them. He's the one they've been focused on. Turns out, all of this talk about God redeeming you, and God saving you, and God elevating you, and God lifting you up, did they get any of that? Absolutely not. These are visual people. They came from Egypt, was a visual culture, and all they see is Moses. Now Moses has gone up to the mountain and not come back. What are they worried about? There's nobody's going to take us home, right? This is the kid stranded at the bar mitzvah party, right? Nobody's going to take me home. No one's going to take care of me, right? This is the kids, get lost in a supermarket. No one's going to give us something to see. Give us a God who is going to lead us home. Now, what should Aaron do? What should Aaron do? Why? He should reassure them. He should cope with their fears. He should tell them it's okay. He should reignite their faith. What does Aaron do? Aaron said to them, take off the gold rings that are the ears of your wives, your sons, your daughters, and bring them to me. And all the people took off the gold rings that were in the ears and brought them to Aaron. Now, you can read that either way. There are some in the tradition that say he was trying to delay them, because Jewish women don't typically separate with their jewelry, right? And the other side is that he says to them, and by the way, it says that there's the gold rings in your son's ears. So if you have a son who wants an earring, it's not such a terrible thing, right? It's an old tradition. And on the other side, he says to them, give me your, and all of a sudden they become very generous, right? They become very generous, and they bring him the gold, and he brought them to Aaron, and he took them from him. He took from them, and cast in a mold and made a molten calf. He made a calf out of gold, probably created a wooden calf and then hammered gold plate on it. Otherwise, a calf made entirely out of gold would be very heavy to carry. But if it's wood with golden plate on the outside. Now, listen to the next two lines, because the next two lines are very, very important. And they, who's they? They is the people. They exclaim, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. And Aaron saw this, he built an altar before it, and Aaron announced, tomorrow shall be a festival of the Lord. Tomorrow shall be a festival of the Lord. Now, so we have a difference of what they're seeing, the difference in perception here. What does Aaron consider this calf? He says, tomorrow is a festival to God. Right. So what is the calf? A calf is the place to come to worship God. The calf is going to be like the Mishkan, a dwelling place that one can come to encounter a God who can't be seen and can't be sensed. In other words, it's a symbol. It is a symbol of the infinite. But it's not the infinite. The infinite cannot be grasped. So you create a symbol of the infinite. But the people have a different idea. When the people see the calf, what do they think it is? That is God. That is the God. And this is the clinical definition of idolatry. What is idolatry? Idolatry is when you mistake the symbol for what it refers to, for its referent. Instead of seeing the object as a symbol, You see the object as intrinsically holy itself. And you invest the object with powers that it doesn't have. You project into the object it's the powers that ought to belong to the infinite. You need to have symbols for the infinite because you can't imagine, you can't experience the infinite without symbols. But symbols themselves are only symbols. But sometimes we elevate those symbols to levels of sanctity that it's not appropriate, and that's what idolatry is. When you're worshiping the symbol as if it were the thing that you were supposed to worship. Joseph Campbell, the mythologist, once said, it's like going into a restaurant very hungry and trying to eat the menu. Right? You eat the menu. Why? The menu is a symbol of the food that's yet coming, right? But you're hungry, so you eat the menu. It looks good to you, right? You're mistaking what's real for what's a symbol of what's real. And you're investing the symbol with a value that it doesn't have. And that's a problem. That's idolatry. Now, what happens next? Yeah, please, please. So Aaron has very pure motives here. He created the calf to be the dwelling place, to be the symbol of the infinite, in the same way that the Mishkan is going to be. Now, what's interesting is to compare the two. The Mishkan is a tent, and in that tent are two chambers. The forward chamber you can go into. The latter chamber you can't go into, because in that latter chamber, the inner chamber, is going to be the Ark of the Covenant. Same one that Harrison Ford found in the movie before he crashed the plane, right? Now, that Ark of the Covenant, remember, is a box. It is a gold box. It is a gold box. And on top of the gold box is a lid. And on top of the lid are two figures of kruvim, of angels. And the notion is that God appears just above those two angels. The phrase in the book of Psalms is Yoshev Kruvim, God who shows up just above those. So the Ark of the Covenant and the golden calf are both made out of gold. They're both mythological. They have mythological figures. What's the difference between the golden calf, which is a sin, and the Ark of the Covenant, which is a mitzvah? What's the difference between the two? For that matter, what's the difference between legitimate religion and idolatry? The difference is that in legitimate religion, you understand that the symbol you're looking at is not itself holy. It is a symbol of that which is holy. It's only a symbol.
The invisible space between them.
Right, there's a space between them. In idolatry, I take the object itself to be holy. I'll give you an example. I did something once I shouldn't have done. You should never preach to a congregation when you're upset. And I got upset once. I was carrying the Torah around the synagogue during a service once. And there were people throwing themselves at the Torah. And I saw this one particular thing. I couldn't stop it. Somebody was trying to get to the Torah, to touch the Torah, and they shoved a child out of the way. I got really angry. And I said, so what's, a Sefer Torah, a Torah scroll, holy, right? What's holy about it? Okay? Is the cover holy, the velvet cover with the picture of the lions? Is that holy? No, it's a velvet cover with a picture of a lion. Okay, take off the velvet cover. What do we got? Parchment? Is that holy? Ink? Is that holy? Then what makes it holy? The words. The words make it holy. In Judaism, the only holy things we have are words. When you drop a yarmulke, what do? You pick it up and dust it off and put it on your head. If you drop a prayer book, what do? Why? Because it has words in it. The words are holy. So I said something to the synagogue, which I probably shouldn't. I said, how many of you read Hebrew? And a bunch of hands went up. I said, how many of you understand what you read? Fewer hands. How many of you can read the Torah in Hebrew? Fewer hands still. I said, why are you kissing this thing? If you can't read it, why are you kissing it? You think that this thing is holy? What's holy is what it says. And if you haven't taken the time in your life to learn to access what it says, what is the meaning of touching it and kissing it? You are worshiping an object. You get the picture? I shouldn't have said that. That was mean. Because it's okay to have holy objects. I mean, in the same way that a wedding ring a wedding ring is only a symbol of a relationship. If the relationship is strained, what is the meaning of the ring? I remember that famous story. Kobe Bryant had that indiscretion in Colorado, and he came back and bought his wife like a 5.5 carat diamond ring. Right, Nebuch, but what, she doesn't need a diamond ring. She needs a husband who has fidelity in his heart.
5.5 carats.
I bet she would rather have the fidelity than the 5.5 carats. All right, let's go back. Let's see. Don't go there. Early the next day, the people offered up burnt offerings and brought sacrifices of well-being. They sat down to eat and drink, and they rose to dance. There's a space here. This is in the movies. We would go, meanwhile, on the top of the mountain, the Lord spoke to Moses. So we're now at the top of the mountain, and God has just given him the 10 Commandments, right? Given him the tablets, right? Hurry down, for your people whom you brought out of the land of Egypt have acted basely. Now let me read that again. Anyone here have small kids who sat in the back of the car fighting and screaming and then maybe throwing up? And one spouse turns to the other and says, your children are acting up. So let me read that sentence again. Lord spoke to Moses saying, hurry down for your people who you brought out of the land of Egypt. To which Moses says, your people, Kimosabi, right? I was minding my business in Midian when you showed up in that bush, sheep are my business, you're the one, hello. They have been quick to turn aside from the way I enjoined upon them. They've made themselves a molten calf and bowed low to a sacrifice, saying, this is your God, O Israel, who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Why is God upset? Why is God upset? Tell me, somebody explain to me what God is feeling and why. Go ahead, Farzan. Right. He says, I'm the God. I brought them out. I'm God, right? Let them seek truth. What do they want instead of truth? What are they willing to sacrifice? They want security. They're afraid. They are coming to God out of fear. They are coming to the world out of fear. They have not learned to reach for truth. He's upset. Now, we would look at this and say, as Moses is going to say, give them a break. They just got out of Egypt. They're still slaves. They're still broken people. The Lord said, I see that this is a stiff-necked people. It's an interesting phrase, by the way. It's a stiff-necked people, right? Now let me be, haniachli, it's hanichali, that my anger may blaze forth against them, and I'll destroy them, and make of you a great nation. This is God's standard operating procedure. When people piss him off, what does he do? It's the Noah story, right? Destroy them, start over again with one good guy. So I'll destroy all of them, and I'll make you the godfather of the Jewish people. Right? But Moses implored the Lord, saying, let not your anger blaze against your people, whom you delivered. You see the language there? Whom you delivered out of the land of Egypt, right? Let not the Egyptians say it was with evil intent he delivered them, only to kill them off in the mountains. So the first reason you can't do that is why? Yeah, what are the Goyim going to say, right? How's it going to look on the front page of the LA Times, right? Nebuch, right? Turn aside from your anger, renounce your plan, remember your servants Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, right? They had righteous ancestors, which is a sweet way of saying they have it in them. They're just not realized yet. Hang on a second. They have it in them. How you swore by yourself, and you made a promise to them. You made a promise saying, I'll make your offspring numerous. So God renounces the punishment. What a strange thing. Now go back to the beginning. The phrase, hanichali, let me be, it's a formality. It's like, if you please, right? But the Bible messes with that, and the Talmud, the Midrash, is going to do even more. That what happens here is you have this remarkable relationship between these two characters, between God and Moses. When God gets angry, it's Moses' task to calm him down. Right? When Moses gets depressed, it's God's job to cheer him up. And that's how they get through the desert together. At the end of the book, at the end of the Torah, when Moses dies, one of the Midrashim is beautiful. God says, who's going to calm me down now? Who's going to be my conscience? Moses functions as God's conscience. Isn't that an interesting, and the notion, this is what Rabbi Schulweis always taught us this, the utter chutzpah of the tradition, to imagine a human being with that kind of provenance, that kind of power, that God turns to a human being and says, you think this is the right thing to do? Hanichali, let me be. And the image is like, Moses like holding on to his coat, not letting him do it. You can't do it. You can't do that. Oh, God says, okay, you're right. Now, but the problem is now, okay, but now what do you do with the broken people? What do you do with this people? And what's going to be the relationship between God and this people now? Knowing that this people is not yet ready to worship an infinite God that you can't touch and feel and sense. Knowing that people is so deeply fearful that all they want is the security to know that they're being watched over and taken care of. Knowing this people's brokenness, what now becomes the relationship between God and Israel? That's what the rest of the Torah portion is going to negotiate. All right, Bob, you got a question? Yes.
Moses is teaching God how to be God.
Right. Yeah.
I'm a little concerned with that. That you kind of has to learn on the job.
But that's what the whole Torah is about. The whole Torah is about God learning on the job. That's right.
Does he know this?
No, apparently not. because his impulse is, I've been betrayed. Right? In a certain way, God is this impulse. I've been betrayed. I want to destroy it all. Right? What's the impulse of the? It's the impulse of the idealist. I'm going to give it more than a child. It's the impulse of the lover who's been betrayed, and it's the impulse of the idealist. Today's the 50th anniversary of the first march on Selma, right? Remember that? There's 3 marches on Selma, right? So today was the first one. Today was the one, the Bloody Sunday one was today. 50 years ago, 50th anniversary, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference and the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee came across, they were marching from Selma to Montgomery for voting rights for African Americans, for black people. And they came across the bridge and the sheriffs were waiting for them and they just beat the stuffing out of them, right? Now, what happens next? That's the question. What's the greatness of Martin Luther King is what happens next? What do you do when your ideals have been betrayed brutally? Do you give up on the ideal of, you could imagine that the next thing would be a race war in Alabama, which could very well have happened. I mean, it would be very interesting, the 60s, because there was, that came later with Malcolm X and the rise of black power, which was having been patient, the betrayal, builds up, and then you end up with riots in the streets and a race war. Martin Luther King, who maintains nonviolence, comes back the next 2 days later on Thursday, and they have a quiet march, and this time the sheriffs give way, and then the third one was the one that made it all the way to Montgomery. The question is, what do you do when your ideals are betrayed? How do you deal with a setback, with the betrayal? Here's a God who has this vision. I'm going to take these people out of Egypt. I'm going to rise them up, and they're going to be Mamlechet Goanim, Goy Kadosh. They're going to be a holy people, and they're going to bring blessing into the world. And they keep disappointing him. And so he just loses it. That's what it is. It's the brokenness of the idealist. Sally, go ahead.
We have been taught to read this as poetry and literature.
Yeah.
With your beautiful interpretation added to it.
Yeah.
What do we think really happened? God did not have this conversation with Moses. Where did Moses get his strength to continue on really?
I don't know if there's any really in this story. These are stories. I mean, really. What do I mean, really? I don't know. I think that what you have here is a meditation on the question, on idealism. Maybe because I was reading, all morning I've been reading things about Selma. And I'm so impressed that King doesn't give up. I mean, King could have stood up and said, go get your shotguns, we're going to war with the whiteys. And we could have had a race war in Alabama. He doesn't give up his nonviolence. He doesn't give up. It's an amazing thing to me. So I think that's what really happens here. This is a meditation about how do you redeem a people from its despair and its disappointment when it meets all the obstacles as it tries to redeem itself. That's to me, that's how I read this story. And you can read it, that's how I read it. Yeah, Marcia.
What is the point when in the Torah it says, observe the Shabbat, or
Yeah.
you will be stoned to death or put to death?
Isn't that wonderful? I'm going to Costco one day with a bag of rocks and say, no, I'm not doing that. Shabbos! All you have to do is do one. I mean, all you got to is knock off one. Then the rest of... Look, the Shabbos there were certain holy things. And the Bible has certain rather brutal prescriptions for people that don't obey these holy things, right? Nobody was ever put to death in Jewish history from breaking Shabbos.
Why is it there?
Well, why is it there? Because it's the community's desire to create a Sabbath. And it's a community's desire to have everybody join in. And it's a matter of life and death for this community.
It sounds like radical Islam today.
Yeah, in a certain way it does. Yeah. I would put it this way. Put it this way. You were slaves. As a slave, you worked 7 days a week. God comes and gives you the joy, the sweetness of a day off, a day to be human. You still have to work 6 days a week. You still have to put in 6 days of labor. You still have to give up yourself 6 days a week to make a living in this culture. But on the seventh day, you can be a free person. What do I do with the person who says, I don't want that? I want to go back to being a slave. Okay? Now, all right, stoning is a little extreme. Yeah, I think so. Only because it's not that we kill them, they kill themselves. You're ready to give up your humanity because you can't take a day off of work. What kind of person are you? I mean, I think that's what the Torah is trying. I think it's the Torah's way of saying, what the hell is wrong with you? That's the same rule we had a couple of weeks ago in Mishpatim when the slave serves 6 years and in the 7th year he's supposed to go free and the slave says, I like it here, I want to be a slave. So what do? You take him to the door and you knock a hole in his ear, right? Because it's like, what the hell's wrong with you? There's the sense of rage. I think that no one was ever put to death for this, but it's a sense of rage. It's a sense of what's wrong with you. This is a life and learning to live as a free person is a life and death matter. How's that? Is that better?
Well, you and I may know that, but to an outsider reading this, it's a very...
Oh, listen, to an outside... The Bible is full of stuff like that. I could offend you. It's not hard to do. There's a lot in here that's offensive and difficult and crazy. That's the difference, and that's okay, because as Rabbi Showais taught us, this is the first book, not the last book of Jewish ideas. If we believed this was the only book, everything had to be followed, right? We would never have written a Talmud and a Midrash and a guide for the perplexed. I mean, there's a tradition that follows this because there's moral progress. So you begin with a kind of narrow-minded rage, and you end up with a different morality later on. All right, Ron, please.
I wonder if God isn't testing Moses to see if he's got the guts and the stick-to-itiveness.
That's a nice idea. That's a nice idea. I think we'll see that God's sort of testing Moses, but I don't know. I wouldn't say God's testing Moses, but I think that it certainly is a test of Moses's. I mean, Moses doesn't like this people any more than God does. I mean, if God said to Moses, tell you what, go back to Midian to your sheep, Moses would say, in a minute, take the retirement buyout and go home, I'll give you a check. Go. Moses would take that deal in a minute. This people is nothing but a headache to him. And it's getting worse. He doesn't know it, but it's going to get worse when he gets into the book of Numbers. You all come back in the summertime when we read Bamidbar. Woo-wee! Moses doesn't know what's ahead of him. He's just as disappointed with them, but he realizes that destroying them is not the way. You can't destroy them. You have a fulfillment. Yeah, come here. Hi, Jay.
You remind me of perplexed and how Thucydides is an answer.
Yeah.
Virginia writes to the papers, very upset, as you remember,
Yeah.
and they hint, Troy paper answers, a Jewish paper,
Yeah.
from the guy to the place,
Yeah.
if you remember.
Right.
I'd like to stop there. And what wrote was Maimonides. Yes, there really is a Santa Claus. Maimonides. Now, I took that out because we've had fun with that. And the fact remains that when you take those two, one on one side, one on the other side, and you begin to get together, you see what I'm on. The point I'm making is that balance always there. God may be upset at one time. The process has to be induced.
Right.
When the process is induced,
Right.
then the methodology is to enable the opposite to begin to relate.
Right.
Once they relate, the process resumes.
Right. I wouldn't say it's opposites. I think this is the tension between the ideal and the real. Right? And the question is, God doesn't bless the people as they are. God offers them an ideal to follow. They're not ready for that ideal. So how do you negotiate the ideal and the real? And how do you live in the space between them? That's the question.
And that's the technique.
Right.
You get that right.
Right. Are we ever ready? No, it's a 2,000-year, 3,000-year process. You know, we're almost there. You come back in another 2,000 years, we'll be there, you know. I mean, you'll be here in 2,000 years because I have, you know.
disagree. The answer is never.
Never, all right.
Because if it's there,
Well, that's the asymptotic notion, but I think,
so it has to be there.
yeah,
And if it's not there, the challenge not there, what do we got? The
Right.
problem, you know,
it's the person who's satisfied with himself too early in life, right? What happens when you achieve all of your goals by the age of 35, right?
until it always comes back with the negative.
Right. All right, let's go back to the text. I'm sorry, yes, please, hi.
I just wanted to ask a question.
Please.
The yod, and how we can treat words as holy if they are themselves symbols.
Say that again.
The yod.
Yeah, what?
At the service that we're about to go to.
Yeah.
Tell the bar mitzvah boy be using a yod instead of actually touching the Bible.
Right.
The words themselves are symbols,
Yeah,
and why, it sounds like you're saying that the ideas that the words represent are holy.
Yeah.
Not the words themselves.
yeah,
So there's the yod, there's kissing the Bible.
yeah.
There's also, I think, particular words for God that you're not supposed to say.
Yeah, you get all this stuff. Isn't it great? Yeah, no, you're right. It's a great question. Well, the yod is there because you don't want to mess up the words in the text itself. Because the words communicate ideas, but the words have to be accurate to communicate the ideas accurately. So you don't want to mess with the text. I mean, the reason you use a yod is you don't rub a letter off, right? You don't rub off a letter. Because if you rub off a letter, you end up with a wrong message, right? That's like getting a letter from the person you love most of all in the world, and half of the words are missing. I don't know, if you ever had that experience, it's kind of frustrating, right?
It's an inevitability.
What?
It's an inevitability.
No, why is it an inevitability? If I protect it, I can protect the words themselves.
Well,
But your other point is even better, which is we do tend to assign holiness to the symbols themselves. The question is, how much holiness do you assign to the symbol itself? Okay? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands. Do I really pledge allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the ideas of this republic, right? But what is the flag? So there was a big Supreme Court case about whether you're allowed to burn an American flag, right? Should you be allowed to burn? If the country stands for the principle of free expression, should that free expression extend to destroying the symbols of the country? That's a really interesting question. Or is that an exaggerated holiness? It's a really interesting question. So here you have the same idea. You take God's name out of circulation because you don't want people using it for pernicious reasons. People were using God's names for all kinds of amulets and superstitions and spells and stuff. You take God's name out of circulation, right? And God's name becomes then sacrosanct. That's exactly right. Right? Now, there's a symbol. The symbol now becomes holy. And the ideas are, spelling God's name out. And this happens a lot. People love this stuff. It's called superstition, but it's very common and it's very popular. People love this stuff, right?
but I learned this thing about a name for God that you can't speak.
Yes.
Here in temple.
Yeah.
So it's not superstition, it's doctrine.
Well, I know that, but it's superstition. Superstition can become doctrine. It's true. No, you're exactly right. I'm not disagreeing with you. It becomes doctrine because we just love this stuff, right? You add all these layers of symbolism and stuff to it, and it becomes a sort of secret. right? When I was a kid, I had a secret decoder ring that I got from Cheerios, you know? And I was the only one in my 4th grade class who could decode the message. No, Nestle's Quick. I was the only one who could, Ovaltine. Ovaltine, right. We love this stuff, the inner language. You know, we love, you join a club, they have a secret handshake. You know, we love this kind of stuff. This is what human beings do. But the problem is, at what point does it become idolatrous? At what point does it become exaggerated? And you start sacrificing people to your superstitions. That's the problem. All right, hang on. Let's do a little more text, okay? Let's go. That was a great question. Thank you. Page 533, bottom of the page, right? Moses comes down. Uh-oh. This is the uh-oh moment, right? Bearing 2 tablets of the pact, of the brit, of the law, inscribed on both surfaces. The tablets were God's work. When Joshua heard the sound of people, of the boisterousness, he said, there's a cry of war in the camp. Moses says, nope, that's the sound of party. It's the sound of song that I hear. As soon as Moses came near the camp and saw the calf and the dancing, he became enraged, and he hurled the tablets from his hands and shattered them at the foot of the mountain. Now the question is, was that the right thing to do? Moses has a problem. Moses has always had a problem. What's Moses' problem? When he gets angry, what does he do? He hits people. Right, he hits things. He has a problem. He does it, and when you're in nursery school, they teach you when you get frustrated, use your, not your fists. Right. Moses never went to a Jewish nursery school. So when he gets frustrated and angry, he tends to break things and people. So he smashes the tablets, and the question was, should he have done that? And why did he do? And what's the meaning of that symbol? Does it mean that this people isn't ready for this? Does it mean that the Word of God isn't ready to live inside of this people? Let's just see what happens, right? He took the calf that they'd made and burned it and ground it to powder and strewn it upon the water and made the Israelites drink of it. All together, go, ugh, yeah. Like, you want it? It's yours. Ugh. And then he turns to Aaron, his brother. And now you got to ask Aaron, why did Aaron do this? Why did Aaron cooperate? Right? Why? Look at Aaron. So he turns to Aaron and he says, what did this people do to you that you've brought such great sin upon them? And he says, let not my Lord be enraged. You know this people's bent on evil. They said to me, make us a god to lead us. For that man Moses who brought us down the land of Egypt, we don't know what's happened to him. So I said to them, whoever has gold, take it off. They gave it to me. I hurled it into the fire, and out came this calf. Damn! What do you think? So what is Adam what?
Sounds like getting your hand caught in the cookie jar.
Yeah, like no kidding, you know? Now what's going to happen to Aaron later? We're going to have to ask that question. So it's interesting, you know, like, so he's got a problem with Aaron, he's got a problem with the people, and he's got a problem with God. Now Moses is in a very precarious position. Elon, what do you want?
So it seems to me that everyone's going a little too far with this.
Really?
So this is before the people actually have the law.
Right.
They haven't seen the tablets and what's on them.
No, but they heard it.
And so they've seen a lot of miracles
Yeah.
since they were slaves.
Uh-huh.
Very visual, physical, they've experienced stuff. But
Right.
the words they've not experienced because he built them on the ground.
Right.
So the expectation's a bit much to have them be patient.
Okay. And the question's now going to be, what do you do? How do you move forward? Do they stay here? Is this the end? How do you move forward? So there's all these different problems now to figure out. What's going to be the relationship between God and his people? What's going to be the relationship between Moses and God? What's the relationship between Moses and the people? What's the relationship between Moses and Aaron? Everything breaks apart. Let's see what happens. Ready? We'll get a little bit more done and then we'll call it a day. Moses saw the people were out of control, for Aaron had let him get out of control, so there was a menace. Moses stood up at the gate of the camp. Whoever's for the Lord, come out here, and all the Levites rally. That's his tribe. The Levites are his tribe. And he said, thus says the God of Israel, put a sword on your thigh, go back and forth throughout the camp. Here you go, Marcia. This is what you love, right? And slay brother, neighbor, and kin. The Levites did, and 3,000 people died that day. And then he says, dedicate yourselves. So first he goes and he murders all the people who are participating in the rite. Now, 3,000 people sounds like a lot, except that there's 2.5 million people in the camp, right? It's 602,000 men, so it's about 2.5 million people. So it's not that many people, actually, in the end, right? The next day Moses said to the people, "You've been guilty of a great sin. I will now go up to the Lord. Perhaps I may win forgiveness for your sin." Moses went back to the Lord and said, "Alas, this people is guilty of a great sin in making for themselves a god of gold. If you will forgive their sin, well and good, but if not, erase me from the record which you've written." What does Moses say to God? No, it's deeper than that. This is suicide by divinity. He stands there and says, "You either forgive this people and come with us, or you kill me now." You know, and what is God's choice? If he kills him, who's going to lead the people? Aaron? Right? If he lets him live, he's got to forgive the people, right? So you talk about twisting the divine arm here, right? Right? "Erase me from the record which you've written." But the Lord said, "He who has sinned against me, him I will erase from my record. Go now and lead the people. My angel shall go before you. But when I make an accounting, I'll bring account for sin." The Lord sent a plague, right? And now he says, "Set out from you. Set out from you, and I'm sending an angel." Okay, now what's going to happen in the next section of the text? The next section of the text is very convoluted. It's all out of order. You ever watch a movie where the scenes are sort of out of order? The modern movies do this all the time. They're trying to give you, it's a sense of disequilibrium. It's a sense of you don't quite know what's going on next. You ever see the movie Birdman, that just won the Academy Award? Has certain parts of the movie where you're not quite sure, like, did that just happen? Is that in his head? Is that real? What's going on? The text feels that way next, because there are 3 transactions that have to be negotiated. One is, who is going to lead the people forward? God says, "I'm not going with you." Moses says, "That's not good enough. You come with us or we don't leave this place." Okay, that's number one. Number 2 is what is going to be the nature of this people, and will God give them a new set of laws? And are they the same laws we had before, or is this a new set? And then number 3 is the most interesting one, which is Moses' personal religious revelation. And that's going to be the most interesting one. So turn with me really quickly. Turn to page 538. We only have a minute, so we're going to do this quickly. Ready? 538, verse 12. Moses said to the Lord, "You have said to me, lead this people forward, but you've not made known to me whom you will send with me. Furthermore, you've said, I have singled you out by name, and you have indeed gained my favor. Now, if I have truly gained your favor, pray," that means please, "let me know your ways, that I may know you and continue in your favor. Consider too that this people is your people." And he said, "Okay, I will lead them into the land." Right? And Moses said, look at verse 17 now. "And the Lord said to Moses, I will also do the thing you've asked, for you've truly gained my favor, and I have singled you out by name." He said, "Let me behold your presence. Hareini et kvodecha." Kvodecha means your honor, your glory, the light of your presence. Moses says, I need to know you. Now, what is Moses asking? Remember at the burning bush? When God shows up at the burning bush, and Moses keeps asking him questions like, what am I going to say to the people when they ask you your name? That's where you get the name from, right? And he says, my name is Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh. I'll be what I will be. Tell him Ehyeh sent me, right? And Moses keeps asking him questions. And here Moses asks him again, who are you? Now, why is he asking that question? Number one, because this God is turned out to be like no other God in the world. Ancient people had gods, but gods had their own sort of physics. Number one, gods were local. So the gods of Egypt were in Egypt. If you're in Canaan, you had a different set of gods. Gods are local. This God, not local. Sorry? Yeah, this God is not local. Very funny. This God is a D train. This God is carrying you from Egypt to Canaan. Where does he live? Where does he live? This is a very strange God, not a local God. Number two, Gods are vengeful. This God should have killed the people. That's what he should have done. They're disloyal. You kill them. This God is forgiving. This God has mercy in him. Very strange. He can't figure out, who are you? And most of all, he says, look, if you want me to lead this people and not get them into trouble again, you got to tell me what you expect of us. What is your character? What is it about you? So the words are, Hareini et kvodecha, show me your presence. But now the whole question is, show me. And the whole Torah portion is a meditation on what is possible to see and to sense, and what is it about God you can't see and sense. That's what the whole Torah portion is about, right? So he says, let me behold your presence. I'm in verse 19. Everybody see it? Yeah. And he answered, I will make my goodness pass before you, and I will proclaim before you the name of the Lord, and the grace that I grant, and the compassion I show. But you cannot see my face, for man cannot see me and live. And the Lord said, there's a place near me, station yourself on the rock, and my presence passes by. I will put you in the cleft of the rock and shield you with my hand until I've passed by, and then I'll take my hand away, and you'll see my back, but my face you'll not see. What? I'm going to play peekaboo with you. I'm going to hold my hand over you, I'm going to walk by, and whoop, you'll see my back. What is going on here? What is the Bible messing with here? It's messing with an idea. It's what does it mean to know God? What does it mean to know the divinity? With what tools do you know? David, go ahead. What are you going to say? So one way to interpret this is that this is metaphor from the beginning. You can't see my face, which means you have to live in the world and make decisions as a human being, and you can't expect me to make the decisions for you. But you can see my back, which means you can see where I've been. You can see what I've done. You can see what I've accomplished. You can see the trail of what I put into the world. But I don't want you stopping to live as a human being and becoming infantile and asking me for guidance every time you need an answer. Bernie and then Douglas. Go ahead.
Isn't this saying what life is about, that you can't know everything?
Yeah.
You can't foresee the future. You can't determine what's going to happen, but you have to have guidelines in order to do it.
Right.
And if you live in a godly way, if you will, and follow the godly outlines, your chances of survival. Prayer is nothing more than asking for guidance. Asking, what do I need to do? And am I seeing this correctly? Yeah.
But you see, but Jews don't pray and say, dear God, tell me what to do. I have Christian friends who say that. It's great. They have a decision to make. They're going to go home and pray on it. I'm going to go, and I say, what do you mean by that? I'm going to go home and ask the Lord, ask Jesus for help. What are you going to do? My friend said. I said, I'm going to go ask my wife. You know, I mean, she knows. I mean, it's a language and an impulse that I've never been raised with. Right? I can ask God for the strength, for the courage, and the wisdom, but I'm going to have to make the decision myself. Wait, Douglas, go ahead.
I see this, I think it's Rambam that said this finite and infinite.
Right.
That the infinite cannot, that the finite cannot comprehend the infinite, and all they can do is understand what the infinite is not. And so the back is kind of, what God is not. You can't comprehend. It's just unknowable because you don't have the capacity to understand infinity.
All right, so 1 year what we're going to do is we're going to put the Torah aside. We're going to spend a whole year reading Maimonides, okay? Instead of the Torah. I'll tell you why. Because with everything in Maimonides, the answer is, well, yes and no. He says that. You're exactly right. You quoted him exactly right. A finite human being cannot know the infinite mind of God. You're exactly right. And then he says something else. He says, however, you have inside of you a microcosm of the divine. You have wisdom. You have reason. Reason is a microcosm of the divine mind. And therefore, it is possible for you to connect with the infinite. You cannot know what God knows, but you can reason with the same reasoning that God reasons with.
That's the back.
Well, all right, that could be the... All right, fair enough.
For the simplicity,
Yeah.
it's to say partnership with with conscience on both sides.
Right. All right, now really quickly, let's go back. Look at chapter 34 on page 540. Lord said, carve new 2 tablets of stone and come up and I'll give you new ones. Only there's going to be a difference this time, right? The first ones, who wrote them? God. And Moses smashed them. The second one, who's going to write them? Now, what's the difference? Don't answer that now. We don't have time. But I'll ask you that another time. What's the difference between laws written by men under the inspiration of God and laws written by God? We'll come back to that. Now, look at verse number 5 on page 541. Moses carved 2 tablets of stone like the first. Early in the morning he went up on Mount Sinai as the Lord commanded him, taking the 2 tablets of stone with him. The Lord came down in a cloud. He stood with him there. Really? And proclaimed the name Lord. The Lord passed before him and proclaimed, the Lord, Lord God, compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness, extending kindness to the 1000th generation, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, yet does not remit all punishment, but visits the iniquity of the parents upon the children, upon the 3rd and 4th generations. Moses hastened to bow down to the ground in homage, and he said, if I've gained favor, let the Lord go in our midst. And God says, I'll go. And Moses talks him into it. So how do we resolve? God is going to go with us to the promised land. Moses arranged for God to forgive the people. And Moses has an experience of God. And what's his experience of God? Does he see God? What does he experience? Words. Look what's here. It should say, it's not what it should say. The Lord passed by. And it should say, and he saw what? What did he see? He should have seen. It should tell us what he saw. If you're in the movies, you would shoot the scene through his eyes, right? But instead, you get words. You get words. And what are the words? Compassionate, gracious, slow to anger, abounding in kindness, extending kindness, forgiving iniquity, transgression, but does not remit. It's interesting. Right? The rabbis cut that part out. Right. The rabbis did a little bris milah on this verse, and they took out the second half of the verse. And so when we read it on Yom Kippur, we only read the good part. Right. The part about visiting iniquity on the children's children for 3 generations, we took out. Rabbis didn't want that in there. But it's interesting. He gets words. He understands the qualities of divinity, not the essence of divinity. He understands the qualities of divinity, not the essence. You see what happens here? It should tell you this is what he saw. But instead it says, this is what he learned about God. Okay? Now, if you come Wednesday night, and we open up For Those Who Can't Believe by Rabbi Schulweis is going to say, that's godliness. And Schulweis is going to argue that the whole notion of godliness is not something he made up. It's something that comes from the Torah. That when Moses is ready to apprehend the essence of divinity and to know God's being, the Torah says, I'm not telling you that. I'm going to tell you how God operates in the world. I'm going to give you the predicates of divinity, the qualities of God that can be yours. It's a very interesting move by the Torah. I'm going to suggest that this whole section here is trying to figure out what Jay talked about. How do you live in the tension between the ideal and the real? How do you live with ideals without becoming disillusioned? And how do you live in the real without losing your ideals? And how do you maintain that tension? And that's exactly what the Torah portion is about. It's time to stop. Let me wish you all a good Shabbos. Take good care.